Hi, friends. Up next is the session for the entrepreneurs who lead and work towards humanity and the growth of the society as a whole. And moderating this session, we have an eminent personality, Mr. Vivek Verma, who's the founder of Upsurge Global and senior advisor at Telangana State Innovation Center. He's a strategic thinker and executive coach with over 3 decades of experience towards transforming social impact space. Joining him on the panel will be Mr. Mayuk Chaudhary, Mr. Ashu Gupta, and Mr. Ganesh Natraja. So, Mr. Vivek, over to you.
Thank you very much, Akriti. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all of you, depending on which part of the world you're joining us today. Let me take this opportunity to welcome all of you to this social entrepreneurship in India session that we are going to have. And I'm sure over the next 1 hour that you will spend with us, you will get a perspective on what's happening in the social entrepreneurship space in India. And then we will spend some time on discussing the scaling. So within the broader goal of enhancing entrepreneurship around the world, TIE Global has this year started a new social impact special interest group, which is focused on social entrepreneurship and associated impact investing. The social entrepreneurship typically attempts to further the broader social, cultural, environmental goals, often associated in areas like climate control, in areas like sustainable development, healthcare, education, technology access, and others. As many businesses, as like any other businesses, the financial numbers and cash flow must be in line with what is expected and sustainable in the long term, while continuing to make the desired impact, because we cannot forget about the impact. We need to find the balance between the two. So in this session, our special interest group leader, which is Dr. Smita Siddhanti, will give us an overview of what we are doing in this special interest group focused on social entrepreneurship. And then we will follow that up with an inspirational keynote by Rohini Nelekani. And then our esteemed panel will discuss the challenges of scaling and the proposed solutions. And then we will have a few questions if we have the time towards the end. With that, let me start by first introducing the leader for our special interest group focused on social entrepreneurship. Dr. Smita Siddhanti is the founder and president of India Incorporated, specializing in management and environmental consulting for various federal agencies in Washington, D.C. She has been the past president of the TIE chapter in DC, and currently serves on the global board of trustees for TIE, and which is the body which focuses on fostering entrepreneurship on a global level. In addition to this, Smita also serves on the Virginia Governors Air Quality Board, on the board of University of Pittsburgh School of Public Policy, and Howard University School of Business. Dr. Siddhanti is a recipient of several awards, including 2014 Future 50 Awards of Smart CEO and the White House Green Government Award in 2016. Smita is committed to enhancing entrepreneurship as the basic engine for economic development and has been actively involved in this and many other global organizations. She is someone who works very closely with the Wheels Global Foundation and the Indaspora. She has worked with many self-help women groups and villages in Maharashtra. Smita is active in several global initiatives of TIE, including the social entrepreneurship, social impact group that we are talking about today. With that, I'd like to ask Smita to come and share with us what we are doing in this special interest group that she leads for us. Over to you, Smita.
Greetings from Washington, D.C. Welcome, everybody, onto this very exciting session and exposing you to social entrepreneurship group that we have formed here, which we in Thai call the SIG, the Special Interest Group for the social entrepreneurship. And thank you, Vivek, for a kind introduction. I want to welcome people to join us in this journey that TIE Global has just started this year. Given that TIE's tradition has been to give back to community, and it is successful entrepreneurs encouraging others. This was the first year we have taken the step of including the larger group of people who are working in the social enterprises, whether they're NGOs or profit or non-profit, to see how we can scale it up and how we can guide them, mentor them, invest in them, and figure out an ecosystem which will actually make a positive change in society. So I'm really excited about our group of people who have joined us. There's been a lot of activity with this group this year, and we have activated about more than 100 globally charter members to be part of the group, and they have also brought a lot of members along with others in various chapters. So looking forward to that. So I wanted to give you a little bit of quick overview on what we mean by our for our SIG of social enterprise and social entrepreneurship and impact investing. That's what we exactly call it. And then we let you know what we mean by it and see how you can join us. And then, of course, we are keen to hear the inspiring keynote by Rohini Nilakarni. So do you want to roll the slides first?
I'll just do that.
Talk that through. Vivek, thanks.
Yes, I'll do that right now.
So just to explain to everybody in the audience so they know what we here in the SIG have defined these objectives of our social enterprise group and what we mean by each of these terminologies that we're using. So our special interest group is focused on social entrepreneurship and associated impact investing, as I just said, and our mission is to provide a global platform to showcase various social enterprises, introduce the impact investing, and bring the thought leaders to share their wisdom. So idea is to encourage the whole ecosystem and create an ecosystem within TIE, which has a global reach. So what do we mean by social enterprises here? These are the social environmental impact orientation type of enterprises that have actually started with in mind what they want to make impact in terms of not just profit making, but also for making the impact to society in general. And they also need to have a potential of scalability. So you don't necessarily just want to be one who it's a good idea, but also an idea that is scalable and given the size of at least India and all other countries where the problem is growing between sort of the haves and have-nots. And clearly we are here to help scale those kind of opportunities and can be either profit or non-profit. So that's an interesting one for a place like TIE, where we generally are into wealth creation and profit sharing. So let's talk about that a little bit. And then we are figuring out how to make that indicators happen. And then the seed and growth stage, they can be in any of these early stage or seed money or growth stage technology and phases of their growth. And they can make impact in any of the areas, whether it's healthcare, education, agriculture. There's a lot in livelihood that's going on, even in fintech and clean tech sectors. We just heard from Niti Aayog director who talked about wonderfully about how all these initiatives they're taking to enhance the whole rural enterprises or effect in agriculture and other areas. And let's hope that TIE can be part of that. And then they can be based, of course, anywhere in the world. And the next slide, it tells us, what does our impact investing? What do we mean by that? So we refer to investments, obviously, that are made into these companies, organizations, and funds with the intention to generate a measurable, beneficial social or environmental impact. So alongside a financial return, I just want to make sure that we do want the NGOs to run like businesses, which has been a new twist in the last few years. They were certainly dependent on grants and funding from outside, but there's more and more awareness that these social enterprises, which could be an NGO or a profit making, they need to be showing financial return in some way, so that they can either invest in their own ventures to make the larger impact, or return it to those who have invested in it. So there are different equity models that we can come up with, then that we are all trying to evolve into. And then impact investments provide capital to address social and or environmental issues. So that's a clear investment strategy for those who want to be investors in impact investing. And then, of course, there are many financial institutions that we're seeing lately who are who have changed their tune to investing in ESG investing, that they call the environmental, social, and sustainable goals. So that's been a new trend, even with large financial institutions. So very encouraging there. So hopefully, angel investors will go into that too. How can we leverage the TIE brand? So why in the TIE? And as we know, the mission of TIE has been is a give back mission, which is how it started in the beginning for those who have achieved somewhat the success, and then bring along into success others. And so with its access of technology and business around the world, TIE is the right forum to help accelerate this moment of bringing business savvy, emerging technology solutions and investments to make this thriving social enterprise. That's our hope, and that's why we brought this into TIE. And I'm hoping that all of you can join us and shape this as we go in further. In the next slide, Vivek, we talk about a little bit on what we thought about what the goals of our SIG will be and what is the metrics of our success. So our success is in providing the platform for showcasing the high potential social ventures, and then also to build this marketplace for stakeholders, impact an ecosystem, and which spans the whole entrepreneurs, investors, mentors, and service providers. We want to integrate the impact agenda into the activities across the chapters of TIE Global Network. And as you all know, TIE has 61 chapters across the globe, and very exciting to see many chapters taking that angle of making a social impact. And then bringing the more capital into the ecosystem from our angel investing network or from other sources that can be collaborated to help set up the impact focused subgroups. Our hope is that we can enable at the very end of it trust areas where we can have people who are interested in making change in the water or drinking water or environment or clean air or education or livelihood, that we can have various trust areas and people can make investments and work with those enterprises to make them sustainable and profit making. So we want to facilitate more and more entrepreneurs to emerge in this ecosystem. So that's our lofty goal. Hopefully you can all join us in this goal to make that happen. So how can you engage with us? We have a committee of very esteemed people, and I'm very fortunate to have a group of us who are actively working to give momentum to this initiative. We have created an email common to all of us, which is the TIE SESIG@gmail.com. And then we also have, would love to hear from you, connect with any of us, and tell us your expectations and bring your energy to whichever part you want to: investment, philanthropy, mentoring, connecting to funding sources, or to the governments, technology, or partners, whichever way. We'd love to hear from you. And so let me introduce you my team of members here. We have I am leading this group for now, and I'm also the Thai Global trustee. And then Ganesh Natarajan, who you will hear from. Dr. Natarajan is founder of SF World and Pune City Connect, and he was a former CEO of Aptech and Zensor Technologies. You will hear from Ganesh very soon on this panel, as well as Vivek, you just heard from him, who's also a board member from TiE Hyderabad and a senior advisor to Telangana State Innovation Cell. And he's a founder of Upsurge Global and a lot that he brings to this forum. And Jayesh Parekh comes to us from Singapore. He was the co-founder of Sony Entertainment Television. You will hear from him also in other sessions. He's an angel investor and author and on advisory board of Akan Jyoti. Sanjay, who's the vice chair of our group, is also founder and president of Action for India, and he's a co-founder of 3i Partners. Abhishek comes from Pune also, and is investment director of Caspian and a trustee of Dravara Trust. So with that, I would really welcome you all, and we look forward to now hearing from Rohini, who's very inspiring to hear from her, and she's not an unknown name, so let me quickly introduce you, Rohini Nilekani, who and Nandan Nilekani, who's both are larger part of the TiE family. Nandan has started Infosys, and Rohini has been very much part of that. And in her own way, she has been contributing a lot to this whole sector of social enterprises. So let me introduce you, Rohini, before we hear from her. I am very honored to have her and to actually introduce her as the inspiring keynote speaker here. Rohini is the founder and chairperson of Argyam, a foundation she set up for sustainable water and sanitation, which funds initiative all across India. From 2004 to 2014, she was founder, chairperson, and chief funder of Pratham Books, a nonprofit children's publisher that reached millions of children during her tenure. She's a co-founder and director of Ek Step, a nonprofit education platform. She sits on the board of trustee of A Tree, an environmental think tank, and serves on eminent person advisory group of Competition Commission of India. So you can see already that her vast reach within education, environment, and many other sectors of social impact. A former journalist, she has written for many leading publications such as Times of India, India Today, Penguin Books, and she published her first book, a medical thriller called Stillborn, and her second nonfiction book, Uncommon Ground, which also found a TV show. She has written several books for young children published by Pratham Books, including the famous one called Annual Haircut Day in 2017. She was inducted as foreign honorary member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. She's also a member of advisory board of the Wellbeing Project since 2019. And both Rohini Nilekani, she's committed philanthropist. And in 2017, she, together with her husband Nandan, have signed the Giving Pledge, which commits half of their wealth to philanthropic issues. So with that, I am very honored to show, to have us all listen to her, get inspired, and then listen to our speakers on this panel. Welcome to you all, and thank you for joining us. Take it from here.
Saurabh.
Namaste, everyone. Thank you to the TiE team for inviting me to deliver this keynote. TiE does amazing work at binding the energy of entrepreneurship to the spirit of service. I'm really glad to be able to address you today, but it's unfortunately only virtual. I'm going to use my 10 or 12 minutes to talk about how together we can achieve more impact at scale as social entrepreneurs. Scale, speed, and sustainability is a phrase that my husband Nandan uses quite often. Now, why scale? Because obviously the size of the response has to be at the size of the problem itself. Why speed? Because there is an urgency to some of today's societal problems that will only escalate if they are not solved soon. And while I'm not at all a big fan of speed for the sake of it, and that we need to focus very much on the what and the how of scale, the fact is that this pandemic has made humans fall so far back on our commonly agreed to SDGs that we have to run a little faster just to catch up and then to surge ahead. And sustainability, well, obviously, so that we can have resilience among people and institutions to cope with new issues as they arise. The last 10 months has been an absolute testament to the need for such an approach, and many people are experimenting globally along these lines. Our teams have put together what we call Societal Platform Thinking, or SPT. It is a sort of wraparound to help reduce the friction to collaborate between Samaj, Bazaar and Sarkar, or society, markets and the state. Its goal is to engage all three sectors in addressing complex societal issues by allowing as many stakeholders as possible to have the agency to innovate in their own context. SPT keeps some very important questions on the table. How can we create a more holistic approach to address societal issues as they constantly evolve? How can we really work together? How can we discover and deploy people's own talents, which are everywhere? How can we give people choice and freedom to innovate? How can we ensure that India's and indeed the world's huge diversity is put to good use so that people can solve problems in their own context? And how can we use technology in the service of these goals? Let me give you an example from the education sector, an area that, of course, as you know, has been globally hit very hard in this year of the virus. In 2015, my husband Nandan and Shankar Maruwada and I set up the Ekstep Foundation to increase access to learning opportunities for 200 million children. We believed then in using all the emerging digital technologies to fuel our mission. Little did we know then that this pandemic would make our work even more relevant than before. As in many countries, India still faces challenges in getting every learner to be where she needs to be. A lot of work has happened in India in the last 3 decades, and the country has shown progress. Even ASAR shows that, the survey, year on year. But it is still not enough. We have a long way to go to ensure that every child is learning well. And now we know we have to ensure this regardless of whether children can be physically present in their schools. Something that we learned in our journey in education, and my journey really began long back in 1999, is that we need to be able to leverage existing infrastructure and meet the system where it is, rather than expect the system to come to where we are. And so at Ekstep, we had to learn to iterate. Of course, we iterated over the years to arrive at something that would finally work. And based on Nandan and Shankar's experience on Aadhaar, India's unique ID system, and based on my work at Pratham Books to put a book in every child's hand, we had learned already that to achieve anything at scale, you have to unleash local innovation. You have to design a system in such a way that people can get anywhere, anytime access to a service or a product. You have to put the grammar to the power of your intent of inclusion and equity. And this led us to work with the Government of India to help them build their digital infrastructure for learning, which is called Diksha. Diksha is the Union Government's national teacher program for India's nearly 3 million teachers. It was designed keeping in mind the DNA of the public education system, which has so many layers. And Diksha kept evolving as an open, public, digital good to empower as many people as possible to participate in this societal mission of improving learning. This platform serves as a bridge between the online and the offline world. Through QR codes embedded in existing textbooks, millions of them, hundreds of millions of children have gained access to quality curated content. On Diksha, teachers can avail of just-in-time, bite-sized training modules. They can connect with each other. They can curate special content for their classrooms, and they can do much, much more. Digitally, they can learn to improve their physical teaching. And Diksha also allows parents to be more involved and engaged in what their children are learning. It allows communities to be involved. It allows civil society organizations to be a part of improving access to learning. And importantly, it also creates space for markets to play, whether through the tuition teacher network or through after-school programs. And all this builds off of the same public infrastructure. Diksha has really taken off as an incubator for innovation. Everywhere, people have come up with ingenious ways to use digital to bridge the digital divide itself. For example, take the story of teacher Revati, who has been very active on this digital platform. She used to talk about struggling with low engagement and poor reading levels in her classroom. Diksha allowed her to curate high quality content online, customize it to her offline context, and then feed what she learned, all her lessons, back into a knowledge commons of a peer group of teachers. Diksha currently supports 35 states in India across 33 languages with over 90,000 pieces of co-created content by India's teachers and other experts. The usage numbers really speak for themselves. There have been cumulatively over 3 billion page views and 275 million content views on Diksha. This platform, which is actually a part of a large ecosystem of platforms, has really come to the rescue of the education system in this pandemic with all its massive school closures and very frustrated students. This year on Diksha, there were 1 billion training sessions for teachers. And just in the last 60 days, there have been close to 400 million learning sessions across pretty much all the states in India. These mind-boggling numbers show what becomes possible when digital infrastructure is animated with human intent and when we build technology that works for society. But the real credit goes to the teachers, the students, and the parents who bravely adopted unfamiliar digital technologies and pedagogies. Our teams learned that once individuals and communities feel empowered with new tools, they quickly create the enabling environment in which change can be scaled up. The example of Diksha, along with the ecosystem of platforms on which it sits, shows how Sarkar can embark on creating some societal platforms together with Samaj. Now the infrastructure is in place to invite in the bazaar as well, and I hope that can happen. All this work embodies the lessons that Nandan and I have learned in our respective journeys over the last 3 decades as active participants in Samaj in my case and Bazaar and Sarkar also in his. It is not something that we believe is unique or new to us. It's a distillation of things that many of you have worked on for the last few decades, I would say. The biggest pivot around which we build the idea of this ecosystem of platforms is on the importance of restoring agency and choice. And societal platform thinking hinges on 4 fundamental design principles. 1, let's design for diversity at scale so that many people can create solutions in their own context, different solutions. This requires 2, a unified but not uniform structure, a backbone, because the solutions that work, say, in Karnataka may be very different from the problems faced in, say, Assam. Number 3, instead of pushing a solution down a pipeline, can we learn how to distribute the ability to solve? And that's how we would be able to bring resilience into our Samaj. And number 4, for all this, we will have to use emerging technologies. We'll have to be careful to be technology enabled, but not technology led. Technology is only a tool after all, and it amplifies intent, both good and bad. And I care very deeply that we should build an ecosystem of platforms that are in the service of society. Platforms that allow our expression as citizens rather than as subjects of the state or as consumers of the market. We want to spread value, not extract it narrowly. And if we want to have impact as social entrepreneurs, this thinking is one way, but not the only way to move ahead together. We invite more discussion around these goals and these themes. 2020 has shown us how one event, one tiny virus, can affect us simultaneously, globally, and personally. It has invited us to understand just how interconnected we are and to design for more inclusion, more access, more agency, so that many more of us can become part of the problem, become part, of the solution and not remain part of the problem. I think the next time around we will be better prepared. Through greatly enhanced cooperation, we are all learning how to scale our responses with urgency and towards resilience, with empathy, and last but not at all least, with renewed humility. Thank you so much and namaste.
Thank you very much, Rohini, for your perspective and valuable insights in the space of social entrepreneurship in India. And I'm sure many of us have learned a lesson or two from your experiences and sharing. We are extremely thankful to you for having joined us today to share your insights and appreciate your time and efforts. Let me also thank Smita, who has been kind enough to help us understand what we are doing in this special interest group, and who's our global board of trustees. So thank you, Smita, for also having joined us today. We now move forward to continue the discussion on the same topic of social entrepreneurship in India with an esteemed panel of people who are going to be talking to us from the phenomenal work that they've been doing in this space, especially on creating scalable models for growth and impact. Let me take the opportunity to introduce what I would like to call stalwarts who've been doing some work in this space. Let me start first with Dr. Ganesh Natarajan. Ganesh is a member of the Chairman's Council of NASSCOM and a lover of scale, as he calls himself, earlier in the corporate sector with Aptech and then Zensar, and now that he's moved space in the social impact sector. He's also a board member of SBI, Hindujaz, AVPN, SVP International, Educate Girls, and Lighthouse Communities Foundation, to name a few. Thank you, Ganesh, for joining us on this conversation today. Welcome, and thank you for joining us, Ganesh. The next panelist we have today is Mayuk Chaudhary. Mayuk is the co-founder and CEO of Milap, and I'm sure many of you will know Milap is a venture-funded consumer tech platform which is focused on funding medical emergencies through social communities, social connections, and networks. Thank you very much, Mayuk, for joining us today and for sharing the insights that we will get to listen to in a few minutes from now. And last but not the least, Anshu Gupta. Anshu is the founder of Goonj and is popularly known as the clothing man of India. He is a Raman Magsaysay recipient in 2015. Goonj's mission is to highlight and address some basic but ignored needs of people on the development agenda. They have now been known as the first and very credible organization which is involved in pretty much every disaster that has happened in the country over the last many years. So let's start the conversation with these three wonderful individuals who've been working in this space, creating scalable organizations. So let me start the conversation with you, Mayuk, and we talk about scale. What is all of this discussion around scale, which is a very, very critical question that we have, not just in every other business, but more importantly in the social impact space. So what is the goal? What is scale? And why should enterprises really want to think of scale? Should everyone strive for it? Mayuk, if you can throw some light on what you think about the importance of goals or scale.
Thank you, Vivek, for the wonderful introduction. Yes, and talking of scale, just to give you a sense of the scale that we have been able to achieve, so that everything puts into the context of where I'm coming from. So we are India's largest crowdfunding platform, and as you mentioned, focused primarily towards medical emergencies. We do a lot of work on fundraising around disaster relief as well. Over the last 10 years, we have been able to mobilize about 1,200 crores from a user base of close to 35 lakh people, which is spread across 130 countries. Now, when I'm talking of scale, I think the first piece, and coming from somebody who is running a venture funded company with a very strong focus on the eventual impact that we create, is to define scale on the context of the company. Now, I may not be coming from a significant global perspective, but my focus always is on the perspective of the company. And I think more than just considering it as a generic word which everybody goes by, it is quite specific to the organization that we are talking about. And scale can have a connotation like, whether you are talking about fund flows, whether you're talking about revenues, whether you're talking about profitability, or even you could be talking about number of lives impacted. These are interconnected, but at the end of the day, an organization needs a defining metric which will eventually define the scale. For example, I mean, just to give you a context of where I'm coming from in a very simple example is, unlike other consumer tech marketplaces, say an e-commerce marketplace or a ride sharing platform, we as a donations or a fundraising marketplace do not have the luxury of giving discounts and making people adopt the platform. I cannot offer discounts in the form of marketing burn or anything and then say, hey, you donate. So therefore, whenever we are talking of scale in the context of Millap, we are talking of how much funds can flow through the platform, how many more people can be impacted, but always under a hard constraint of the sustainability or the unit economics and metrics of the company. Because at the end of the day, scale is a means to an end, and the end is survival. I think every organization, doesn't matter whether it's a for-profit structure, not for-profit structure, the goal has to be survival. Only if I survive, I create impact. And therefore, I think scale is a supremely important criteria to be put in the context of an organization when it is looking at a 20 to 30 year survival. I'm sure the other panelists will have wonderful perspectives to it from their own views.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mayuk. And I think that's a very important perspective, and all of us need to understand that and help define that for ourselves, because it's very, very critical to have specific goals. And also, like you said, survival, sustainability is very, very important. Thank you very much for that perspective. With that, we move to you, Ganesh. With the wonderful work that you are doing at the Lighthouse Communities Foundation, in the space of vocational ability, building amongst many other things, so vocational building is just one of the things you do in Lighthouse Communities Foundation, but there are wonderful other activities you're doing. So I'd like to get some thoughts on you about, the failure of the skills mission in the country, because of which the other organizations are having to do this work, which ideally should have happened somewhere else. And how is it that this is differentiating and making a difference to the society through all the wonderful work through LCF, or Lighthouse Communities Foundation? Can you share some thoughts around that?
Thank you, Vivek. In fact, I was just thinking about, I always think in threes. So I was thinking of what three words to use to frame this whole topic. And I think Rohini gave us a fantastic lead when she talked about Samaj, Bazaar, and Sarkar, of course. And I think that's also the answer to the question you're asking. Because if you look at the skills movement, which actually has been there for some time and came to life when the government, Mr. Modi's government, started the whole Ministry of Skills and Entrepreneurship. But somehow Sarkar, in its desire to do good with the NSDC and everything else, forgot that, look, it can't do everything by itself. Because even if you set up the world's best training institution for plumbing or whatever skills, if you are not asking Samaj what they really want, I mean, you can put all the money and all the good intent in the world, but it doesn't scale. Similarly, I mean, it's not just a question of somebody putting money. There has to be a collaborative effort of Bazaar, of people who want to do good, philanthropists, corporate social responsibility to do. And I think the success of LCF, we started off as Pune City Connect 6 years ago. And we said that, look, we will work with the municipal corporation, not shun them. We will work with every corporate member of the city. And today, if you look at what we have done, 72,000 lives changed. We have 8 skills lighthouses, multiple digital literacy centers. And we really believe that our communities that we impact are reaching an inflection point. And we always believe that, if 20% of the community has changed in terms of attitudes, in terms of skills, in terms of livelihoods, the community itself is at an inflection point. Today, if you look at the next step, why it became Lighthouse Communities Foundation, we said, let's aspire bigger, let's grow bigger. In fact, our whole model was built around agency, where we said the young person coming in should not be told that this is what we want you to do, but should actually dream the impossible dream. And we should enable that person to realize the dream. Which is why our placement records, our retention of people in jobs is so much better. And then, of course, we also said that Sarkar has been the reason for our success, because it's a joint venture that we did. And now we've tied up with the National Institute of Urban Affairs, which is a part of the Ministry of Urban Development in Delhi. And they want us to scale to every possible urban location, certainly the smart cities. Similarly, if you look at moving to Bazaar on scale, we are talking to some of the biggest global foundations and serious philanthropists and say, look, will you support us nationally, across Asia, and possibly in every city where you're looking for? And so the same model that Rohini's talked so eloquently about, the Samaj, Bazaar and Sarkar model, I think will help us to scale from Pune, across Maharashtra, across India, and we hope across Asia. So I think that is what scale is. Find a model, make sure you're doing what is right for every constituent of the model, and let the ecosystem blossom.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ganesh. And I think that's a very interesting perspective. How do we bring the ecosystem together? And it's about, collaboration rather than one of us trying to say that we can do it all, whether it is individuals, NGOs, or even the government. So thank you for bringing a valuable perspective there. And with that, we move to you, Anshu, and while we talk about all of this work happening, one of the key things that I have known you and Gunj to be focusing a lot on when we talk about people is this whole dignity of giving. And really, that's where the differentiation, as I see it, has been of the work Gunj does. And that's what makes it so powerful. So can you talk to us a little about this philosophy about changing the whole mindset, and why is it this significant, and how is Gunj making this great mission, which is making a huge difference to the society?
Fine, thanks, Vivek. So, very bluntly, if I say, I would say that scaling up of charity, I believe is one of the worst idea, because one of the biggest problems, charity is fine, if you do it like one-off and it's like an instant reaction, but charity should not be sustained, because one of the biggest problem with charity is that it kills your dignity. And without dignity, you cannot talk about the development. Right? And charity might be a very beautiful subject with all the best intention, for the doer of it, but never for the receiver of it. And something which I don't want to happen to me, why am I doing it to someone else without even making that person, a stakeholder of it? And and this is a simple thing which happens even in the giving part, often we give what we have, we don't give what people need. What Ganesh also spoke about in a different way is something like sitting here with all good intentions, we plan something, but we are not understanding what is needed, there. So that's how this entire concept of dignity for work, started happening at Gunj, which used to be called Clock for Work. And imagine, how we ignore certain things. And in life of Gunj, the three basic need, you say food, cloth, and shelter, and then suddenly you ignore the clothing. It is not even a development subject. It does not even come anywhere in the SDGs. But if you have to recognize who is poor, who is rich, who is skilled, who is unskilled, first thing which you see is the cloth of the person. And that's also a symbol of dignity. Most of us do not wear clothes just because it is warm or it is cold, but also because we think it is the concept of dignity. And speak a paragraph and you have to use the word donor and beneficiary a few times, right? And you can experiment it. So when we start talking, we will always say donor and we will always say beneficiary. So we actually put the person on an elevated platform and see someone with whom we are working, or someone who is giving us a chance to look into his or her life, who is basically the partner for our dreams, because it is my kida that I want to do something, and someone is opening his or her life, her life to me, and allowing me to enter in her or his village, or his house. This is basically that person is doing a service to me, in any case. So once you put that person much below you or like this, when in the discussion, when in the discourse the equality is not there, how do you really talk about the equality? How do you talk about the development in the process? So that's why we are saying that it's high time that we charity, I mean, the we make sure that charity does not sustain, because charity creates donor and beneficiary. Rather, we talk about dignity, because dignity, the first important part is there will not be any donor beneficiary. It will be just a stakeholder. All of us will bring in whatever we can, and the dignity for work is one of the big example where people contribute their labor, people contribute their skills, people contribute their resources at the receiving end. I mean, people who receive this material from Gunj, cloth, utensil, footwear, whatever is the urban surplus, they're actually paying back in a currency what they have, and they are paid in a currency which is there in urban part of India. So it's a barter. It's a proper stakeholder relationship where you are giving something, I am giving something, and if you are calling beneficiary, all of us are beneficiaries. Simple.
Thank you, and that's why I said that that's such a beautiful perspective that Gunj brings, and changes the entire landscape around that. And thank you, Anshu, for kind of driving that force and changing many of us who think, or used to think differently, and now it's completely changed. And for a minute, if we move away from the people aspects, and Mayuk, coming to you, how do we use product and customer happiness as pillars for scale? With the scale that you have achieved at Milap, with phenomenal numbers that you talked about a little earlier, can you share some insights on why these are also very critical aspects when we want to achieve scale?
Sure. Carrying on a cue from what Anshu mentioned, and I think a critical piece, a phrase that he used is, what does the recipient need, right? In the context of, say, a consumer tech platform, or the way we look at the work at Milap, we would say exactly the same thing as how obsessed are you with users? Because at the end of the day, the key question is, whatever I have built is of utility only when the users have adopted it. And therefore, the reason for a focus on the product is to eventually create something which comes out of an obsessive focus from the users. Now, Milap started off as a generic crowdfunding platform, gravitated towards more and more medical emergencies, because that's where we found users utilizing the platform to the maximum, right? I mean, when it's coming to cancer cure, organ transplants, anyone across the societal spectrum can fall under duress and may ask for money. And therefore, the product is critical, because that thinking gets you closer to the user, to answering the question of what the user needs. Now, coming back to the point of, I think that connects directly with the need for customer happiness, because at the end of the day, the way we look at Milap is, we are trying to make people happier. The person who needs money is happier, because money may not, or our goal is that money should not stand between life and death. There are many other, I mean, you could have raised the money, but still you couldn't save the person is one thing, but it should not be money that stands between life and death. The people who are giving are happy because they have given it to a worthwhile purpose. The money was utilized for the right purpose, right? And to take that concept into a real world, I think we just a few months back went completely free as a platform. We used to charge a fees on our fundraising in order to sustain the revenues of the platform. I think we will be the first company in India which made the platform totally free. And today we depend on voluntary tips by our users. If they like our work, they may choose to give nothing in order to sustain the platform. We have taken that bold stance. So now that level of faith on the users comes from a confidence that we definitely can make our users happy. So customer happiness, say in our context, is no longer a corporate jargon. It is survival. It is revenues. It's everything for us. So I think that's how we at Millap, talk about it, and that's what our pillars of scale are. On one side, product. Be obsessed about what the user needs. Keep changing yourself because you are serving the user. On the second hand, the second pillar is make happiness of the customer your bread and butter. Link it to everything. My company metrics are are directly linked to whether my customers are happy or not. Our survival is dependent on that. So yes, so that's the way we have learned it, and that's what our small but limited experience has shown us.
Thank you very much. And I think it's a very important perspective. Many of us don't realize that, some of these things are not just for the FMCG sector or some of the other sectors. They actually equally apply to the whole social impact space. And I think you people have demonstrated that beautifully at Millap. And thank you for sharing that insight. Having looked at people, having looked at customer happiness, having looked at, product, I think let's also move to another critical aspect in my view, which is technology. And Ganesh, I'll come to you to ask you in terms of, the importance of technology and how are you people at the Lighthouse Communities Foundation are using technologies, and what's your view generally about use of technology in the entire social enterprise section? Is it important? Should people look at this? And what should be your perspective?
See, that's a good question, Vivek. And my point is technology is an imperative for scale. And it doesn't matter whether you're building a corporation, a bank, or a social enterprise, because I think that's the point. And let me frame that by saying, if you look at our own ambition, we are saying that, look, by 2030, our mission is at least 1 million lives changed. At least, definitely the national government, but at least quite a few state governments, quite a few provincial, local governments will have to be impacted. We will have to actually work with at least, I would say, maybe 5 or 6 large foundations and maybe a couple of thousand corporates. And finally, we are actually started to work with Millap and Mayuk's team to say that, look, how can we get 1 million people who just have maybe $2,000 or maybe $1 lakh to spare, but how can they also participate in this revolution called the Lighthouse Communities? Well, the minute you put that in place, all of you who are in technology will know that I'm talking about a digital platform, because that platform has to be there for the ecosystem players to, without friction, be able to communicate with each other. So we are now working with Aspen Institute's Global Opportunity Youth Network, and we are kind of building the communities and getting funding to build out the platform. Apart from the platform, we are using some amazing technology. It's a technology called Skills Alpha, which will enable every individual. It doesn't matter. I may be a young person at the age of 18 in a slum. From the time I get mobilized to come and dream my dream in the Lighthouse, to the skilling process, the counseling process, getting a job, being the alumni of an association, and really lifelong career counseling, all that through artificial intelligence, personalization, adaptive, they should own it on their mobile phone. So that's our idea. And last but not the least, we must connect. We all talk about ERPs. What's the point in potentially having 1,000 lighthouses, multiple states in the country, maybe 3 or 4 countries outside India? We need to connect because the community must come together. And let me stop by saying technology is common. Using it well is uncommon. So the use of commonly available technology uncommonly well is what the social sector must do. And it also kind of speaks to what Anshu said so well, that he said that, look, charity cannot be scaled. He's so right. Because the minute you think of inclusion, that word itself means that, look, you feel that I have to include somebody. That somebody must want to be included. And that somebody will want to be included if we give them the tools in their hands to say that, look, I am part of this larger global community. And we are passionate about it. We know that we will use the technology well, but I think it's important to build a community of people who can use that technology and make it work for themselves and for the world. So that's the way I see technology.
Thank you, Ganesh. And coming from someone who's, for a better part of his life run technology companies and now is bringing a lot of that knowledge into the development sector, I think these are phenomenal insights. And thank you, Ganesh. not just for doing the wonderful work of bringing this technology, but also sharing these insights, because a lot of us listening on this call will actually benefit from that, because quite often I hear founders of impact organizations not paying enough attention to technology. And I think if we take a cue from what Ganesh said, I think it's a very, very critical piece. And moving on to something else, which I think is also a very important aspect when we talk about scale, especially in the development sector, is coming to you, Anshu. You always talk about the fact that it's not important to grow the organization, but the importance has to be to grow the idea, which means it's not just about yourself, but about how do you get ecosystem developed. And quite often we have people who focus only on their business, their social impact organization, and you have again been someone who's championing growing beyond just yourself. So can you talk to us a little about that and how you make that happen and how that's important when you look at it from a scale perspective?
So, Vivek, I think when in the world you have problems, say in millions or plenty, whatever you want to call, you want solutions also at the same scale. And you want people who work on those solutions also on the same scale. Why should I have that arrogance that I can actually solve it? I mean, who on this earth could really solve any problem that way all alone? And social sector that way is one of the most beautiful sector. I mean, often people don't understand, but if you see, it is by nature it actually has one of the best collaboration. I mean, the kind of partnerships we all develop. Fine, we don't sing a song about it, but whole lot of us, a large number of us, actually work with each other, use each other's strength that way. So what we have been advocating is that, like if I talk about Gunj today, we must be dealing with about 6,000 tons of material, every year in doing it. But what is that scale? If I see the potential, scale always need to be seen, in respect to the potential what we have of the same work. Until unless you have 100,000 more, similar kind of organization, better kind of organization, and especially say suppose we've on our own because there was nothing that time, on such issues. But now you have, so this is about 21, 22 years back. But in the last 2 decades, there are hundreds of things. There is Google God. There are these kind of forums. There's personal interaction. So if we just work with people, and if we just I often say we are giving you a copyright to copy your ideas. I mean, just work on it and correct the mistakes which we have done. I mean, it's not that we made those mistakes deliberately, but maybe we didn't know, or whatever we knew that time we tried. But there are 100 better ways of doing things. So I am not repenting on what I did, what I didn't. Whatever skill set we had, whatever opportunities we have, we use that. But now other people can certainly do that. So I believe to solve the problems of the society, or why should we just talk about the problems to live a better life? Doing good is a collective responsibility. It is not the responsibility of few people, and we certainly need to work with the people who want to do good. And that's why the scale up of idea is much more important than the institution.
Thank you. Thank you, Anshu. And it's a very, very important parameter that you talked about again, that, collaboration and how do we bring the ecosystem together, because it's not just about us and our organizations. With that, I'll move on and come to you, Mayuk. And while everyone understands that scalability is a very, very important factor, and, we need to scale, we need to create that sustainability, even in the social impact space. But I think a question that many of us have when we are talking about this scaling, when we are talking about this sustainability, is that how do we fund this scale? Because as you want to scale, the expenses are going to go up. Where does the capital come from? And it's not an easy task. So can you talk to us a little about your experiences with Milap and how people should look at the whole funding piece?
Well, I think funding in itself can be an hour-long or even a longer session. One of the pieces that we have learned over the years, and which is often ignored, is the fact that every entrepreneur needs to sit back and ask the question, which mode of funding suits my way of thinking and the way I believe and my expertise. So, for example, when it came to Milap, it took us a few years, but I eventually understood one perspective that I was not the best person to go out there and raise grants. That's not, it would not be the best way for me to spend the time or would not do justice to the organization. What I understand much better is revenues, is to build an engine that lasts. That's a cash positive engine. And that's what I am. That's how I think. And we have been revenue positive since 2016, funded our growth via throughout our revenues. And yeah, as a next step, we actually are going to gun for if things go right, we will actually be gunning for an IPO in the next 12 to 24 months. So I think crucial piece that I would like to highlight in this limited time is the fact that every entrepreneur needs to ask the question, what suits my style and what suits my thinking, and that's super important. So yeah, that's how I think about funding scale.
Wow, fantastic, Mayuk. I'm not sure how many people would have ever expected that here's a social impact organization which is really talking about an IPO and how it is important, even in this space. So, congratulations for changing the whole perspective and the landscape in this space, Mayuk, and wish you all the best as and when
Thank
you
you.
do actually go for that. With that, coming to you, Ganesh, so what do you think are the critical success factors when we look at scaling, and especially in the social enterprise space in India?
Well, I mean, let me frame my answer by saying I have three heroes in the social sector in India. One is right here, Anshu. I think Anshu is a phenomenally passionate guy. Then we have Safina Hussain, who's been a speaker even at our Thai forum and who runs Educate Girls. And Safina is absolutely outstanding. And the third is my partner in Lighthouse Communities Foundation, Ruchi Mathur, who is IIM Ahmedabad 95, dedicated her life to the social sector. What do Ruchi, Anshu, and Safina have in common? One is they have tremendous depth in their thinking of scale, which means that they first look at scope. First look, what is the difference I can make to that one individual who needs to be loved and included, and then they think of scale. So I think the power of their idea is the first thing that I think any social entrepreneur must have. The second, of course, is the business model. I mean, I spoke about the public-private partnership business model. Everybody will do, as what Mayuk was saying, something that suits their style. But having a powerful business model that does not become a limitation in itself is important. The third is the obvious one. I mean, the power of team. There is no one entrepreneur who can be the Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh of the social sector. So you have to surround yourself with extremely bright people, like we all say in the corporate sector. The fourth, I would think, is what Mayuk is trying to do, which is the ability to raise money. I mean, it is very nice to say that, look, I'm going to be this barefoot entrepreneur and I will be very, very poor. I will set up a skills entity which people may not want to come to, but they will come to because they need us. No. If you come to one of our lighthouses in Pune, it will be better than some of the better universities because we believe that the person whose life we are changing deserves to see a quality which suits what their future aspiration is. So I think that's important, this thing. And finally, I would think, surround yourself with an excellent board, with excellent partners, etc., etc. So the minute you look at a very powerful idea with the passion to execute, you build a business model, build a team around you and a board of directors, make sure the funding runway is accurate, you have the model for success in the future. And I would suggest that all of you look at that very, very seriously.
Thank you. For those of you in the room who were looking at what should be the model for you to succeed, I think Ganesh has given us the mantras for making social impact sector companies also succeed. And many of them, to our surprise, or may actually not to our surprise, is how I would like to see it, is exactly the same as any regular enterprises. So it isn't any different. And thank you, Ganesh, for sharing that. And coming to you, Anshu, there has been a phenomenal role that Goonj has played in the disasters that have happened in the country over the last, many, many years. And you people are known as the people who reach there the fastest and make the greatest impact. So I'd like to know what is the role these disasters has played for you in the growth of Goonj? And I know it sounds a little, paradoxical, but I think has it played a role? And what do you think about it?
No, so jokingly, I always say it's like a forced scale, right? I mean, because again, as a social development organization, also you have a choice that you really want to go to Nisarga, Amphan, and all the disasters, or you still want to stick to some of the things. But we just decided that wherever possible, we will try our best, because disaster A, it is our responsibility. If we are in this space, if we do not respond at the time of crisis, I mean, why are we doing this? It's very simple. Number one. Number two, disaster also gives us a lot of opportunity to learn, right? I mean, otherwise, as an organization, when you go to the communities, you pick up certain villages, certain areas, and start working. But disaster is one time where you really get a holistic view of the community. You really not you go much deeper, and you also build up a relationship with large number of people, because you're standing with people at a very critical moment of life. So I would say that responding to the disasters with a learning mode, and then I mean, we never went there as a resource agency. We never went there with the mindset that we are here to help you. But we have been there to learn, because and it is giving us an opportunity to create more systems, come back to the normal, move out of the standing ovation conferences, and learn that people who have more, they lose more. So I mean, even today, that is one of the reasons that I pick up my camera. I spend a month in every big disaster, because that again puts you exactly at the bottom of it, and then you say you have to start again. So yes, it has been helpful in scaling, for sure, for Goon. And we also decided that if we have entered in a disaster area, we will at least be working for 3 to 5 years there, because there's no point you work for 3 months, do the so-called relief work, and the most critical part, when people are coming back to their life, you leave and you come back. You don't learn, people don't get anything. So that's how we have been doing at Goon. And it has also helped a lot of other organizations to take up the same models now.
Thank you, Anshu. And I think that's again a very important role, that it is about the long term. It is about sustainable change that you want to bring, and it's not just about doing the short term work. And it goes back to the whole dignity, sustainability, and the long term. So it's been wonderful talking to all three of you, and getting various perspectives around scale, and how it is important, even within the development sector, to look at scale. And we saw from the responses that we've seen from Goonj, from Lighthouse Communities Foundation, from Milap, and your own personal perspectives, having been people who've spent a few decades in this space, that it is critical for us to look at goals, passion, dignity, governance, technology, and last but not the least is the ecosystem that we look at, because all of these are important factors when we look at scaling these social impact organizations. And for some of us who thought that these were only meant for regular commercial organizations or for-profit organizations, I think we need to understand that the development sector isn't any different. All of these are especially important when we want to look at scale, because scale, whether it's commercial or it is a development organization, does not differentiate itself, and it requires each of these. And we heard from this imminent panel that we had today that these are very important things that we must focus on. That actually brings us to the end of the conversation. We can continue to have this conversation, like Mayuk mentioned earlier. If we pick any one topic, and with the experience that these people bring, we could spend a couple of hours with each of them, with each of those topics. But unfortunately, we had decided we will spend the time we have kind of come to the end of now. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all three panelists who joined us today. Thank you very much, Mayuk. Thank you very much, Ganesh and Anshu. Continue doing the phenomenal work that you people as individuals and the organizations that you are driving do. And we are very fortunate that you people are doing the work you are doing, because the world needs to be made a better place for ourselves, and for sure for the next generations that come after us. And a lot of work that you are doing is going to show results in the long term. And I would also like to thank Smita, who is the trustee and also is the leader at this social impact, social entrepreneurship special interest group. So thank you very much to all of you, and thank you very much to all the audience who joined us. And I'm sure you have taken a few lessons which you can go back with and change the thinking you have about social entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurship, especially in India and especially around scalability. Thank you very much. Good evening, good day, and good night to all of you, depending on whichever part of the world you're joining us. And thank you very much to all our jury who is here. With that, we would like to sign off and let you move to the other sessions within the TiE Global Summit. Thank you.